Your mid-year enrollments and benefit plan changes in Enforce Cloud Suite. I'm Sue Pokorny, and I'm a principal consultant for the HCM practice here at RPI. I've been with RPI for 4 years, but I've been working in Enforce Cloud Suite and Lawson platforms for the last 20 plus years. Ariane, you want to introduce yourself?
Of course. Thank you, Sue. Hi, everyone. My name is Ariane Silva. I am a senior HCM consultant with RPI. I've been with RPI for almost 10 years now, and I work mostly with GHR and GHR benefits implementations, which is the focus of our presentation today. So we're going to talk a little bit about mid-year enrollments and changes, and I will get us started. I will talk a little bit about updating contribution rates and some ACA reporting considerations. So let's go over our agenda for today. So the first thing that we're going to cover is updating your contribution rates and rate tables, how to run your benefit updates. Then we're going to talk a little bit about ACA reporting and some things that you wouldn't need to, pay attention as you work through those mid-year changes. And then we're going to end it up discussing a little bit FSA spending accounts and limits and talking through life events, because we know that that's a big part, right, of mid-year changes. You have resource movements throughout the year, and you also have all of your employees submitting qualifying events. So we are going to touch base on a couple of items that are going to be important to you and your organization, right? And tasks that are important to keep in mind as we move throughout your plan year. Let's get started. So the first thing that I want to cover today, and this presentation is going to be a mix, right, of we're going to show you a little bit of the PowerPoint, and we intend to do some demo as well. So I would like to start covering contribution changes on your plan. And for the most part, when we think about mid-year changes, right, we're thinking about employee-driven changes, right? Employees that they're going through, life events or hires that are happening throughout the year, and they have new benefit elections. But there are some mid-year changes that can be driven by the organization, right? A couple examples could be like retirement changes. It's not, there are some scenarios where as an organization, you are allowed to change contribution amounts. And this needs to be reviewed. I would recommend, if you guys have, if you're planning on changing any of those rates, that you communicate that to your legal team first, that you review that those, changes I would recommend that you review that with your legal team, and that you are making sure those are changes that are allowed, right? But in certain scenarios, you would be able to go through, throughout the year and make those updates. I'm going to walk you guys through how those changes can be made in Infor. So I will switch to, I will share right now. So just give us 1 second. There we go. You should be able to see Infor right now. And for some of you, this screen is not going to be very familiar. I am using the new web consolidated menu for benefits. And if you don't know what that is, if you guys haven't seen that yet, I do recommend that you take a look at the new web consolidated menus. Infor is rolling that out. I believe they are going to make that GA next April 2026. So as soon as possible, if you can start enabling those menus in your test environment. You know, it might require updates on some training documentation, make sure that everybody's comfortable, right, with the new menus. And this is not only for benefits, right? We have new web consolidated menus for the HR administration, for absence, performance, all the different modules within the HR talent. So bear in mind that what I'm showing here, some of those forms or screens might be a little bit different. The first place that I will take you guys is the benefit plans. In our example, we have a change that is happening mid-year for a retirement plan. The first thing you would do is you would update your contribution table, and you would need to make sure that you have a new date for your contribution table, right? So the last, on my 403B, the last contribution table for this plan is dated as of 1/1/2025. And this plan had a match value that is 100% of employee contribution up to 7%. So what we will do in our exercise here is we are going to update this percent to 8%, but our update is happening 6/1, right? So it's a mid-year change. How you would have performed that in Infor? First thing, you would have copied this contribution. You're going to create a new rate, and we're going to basically say this is going to be effective 6/1/2025. Once you submit, the system creates a new table here as of 6/1. And I believe some of you guys might be familiar with this process because for the most part, you're doing this during open enrollment, right? So before your open enrollment starts, you have all that communication with vendors and you guys are going through negotiations. Once that is done, you are updating your contributions for the new plan year, right? But that runs through your plan year. This is a scenario where you would have that change outside of your open enrollment process. So you would update that contribution table. The next step for us would be run the benefit plan update. Updating this contribution here by itself, it's not going to change anything on your resource records. So if I go under maintenance by benefit plans and I look into my retirement contributions, you can see that my match here hasn't changed, right? So one more time, if I go back to my contribution in here, I should now be able to update this contribution for 6/1, right? And I want that update to be reflected in here. So what we need to do is we need to run a job that is now under your maintenance processes, and that job is called benefit plan updates. This job needs to run and it needs to be updated, right, in order for you guys to see those changes flowing through the employee. As you can see in here, the system already tells me, well, you did update a contribution. So that is a new group, a new date for this plan. And it's basically telling you, right, this plan will need an update. Once you do that, once you look into your benefit plan updates, review the changes that are required, you can simply click on the create report. This is going to run the job and those updates will be effective. So I'll select my benefit plan in here can see this is the coverage class employee. You can do two things in here. So this report has an option to update immediately those records, meaning all those changes, they're going to be effective immediately on the resource record. Or you can run this job in basically the report mode, right? You would see a preview of those changes, and then after that, you would be able to process. For the sake of time, I will go ahead and I will update this immediately. Then I will select the date in which I'm running my updates up to, right? So our date was 6/1. If by any chance you guys had two updates for this plan, you would run this in the order in which you need those updates to be effective. So let's say you made a change 1/1/2025, another one 6/1/2025. You would run through 1/1 first and then 6/1. Create transactions, you would only select that if you guys have files that are using the transactions and you need to be tracking that, then you would select an update with the correct reason. And then you can submit. Once you submit, this job is gonna run, and basically all the employees that are currently enrolled, the end goal is their records will be updated. So you can see another, and just a side note, if you guys want to take a look at, when your jobs are processing versus when they've been completed, you can always select your async administrator, and this will tell you if this job is running or if it needs to be completed. Looks like my job was completed. So I'm going to go back to maintenance processes. And then you can see here, all the records have been updated. And if I double click on one of those, if I double click in one of those records and I see my update for 6/1, right, I can see that my match went from 7 to 8. Now, if I go back to maintenance by benefit plans and take a look at the resources that have been enrolled, that have been enrolled in my 403B plan, you can see that now those changes are in effect. Another important thing in here when you're thinking about those changes, especially in retirement plans, is to make sure that, all of those limits that they are being tracked, and that BSI has been configured, right? That is an integration with payroll to make sure that none of those plans, they are going over limits. And Sue is going to talk about that a little bit more. But basically, one of the first steps that you would do when you guys have those mid-year changes is updating those contribution tables, when creating new versions of those tables and running this benefit plan update. This job will make sure that all those changes are flowing through the resource record. Okay, so we covered those updates on contribution tables, right? Another thing that I want to briefly talk through before I hand it over to Sue is ACA reporting. And what are the things that you guys should keep in mind, right, during the plan year? Because we usually think about ACA right up in November, December, when we need to run the reports, create 1095s, right? But ACA reporting, it's something that you should basically keep an eye on throughout the year, right? To make sure that at the end of the year, when you're running your reporting, you don't run into any, big issues, that you are able to successfully complete your reporting. One of the first things I would like to touch base on is the configuration that is on a plan. So your medical plans, they are going to have a ACA reporting section. That section needs to be populated, and it's under the main tab. However, under the contribution tab, you also have a section for ACA reporting. So make sure that you're updating that, especially if you are making, any mid-year changes, creating new contribution tables, making sure that once you copy that these settings are coming over, right? And are being up to date. If you want to go to the next slide. Another thing that I would like to just, as a reminder, if you guys are running, if you have life events in Infor, and you would like the system to create offers based on those life events, there is a setting on the enrollment rules, and that setting, it's called create ACA offers. That needs to be enabled, right? If you want the system to create those offers based on those life events. So what would happen in here is every time someone goes through that life event process, the life event is approved, the system will create an offer of coverage for that person following the date of the life event. So again, in order for that process to work, you would need to have that selected on your life plans. Those are, again, a couple of things that you need to keep in mind especially as you make mid-year changes for those medical plans. I think I have an example here of a resource, right, that had I believe this resource had a birth, and that was in effect 610, right? So you can see how the system stops the coverage of the offer of coverage and creates a new record 610. That's how you would work if you had that setting that we just talked about enabled on your life plans. Another item that we probably want to take a look at is when you run your mass create eligibility, there is a setting to create ACA offers. So if you have this job scheduled, right, make sure that you are selecting that option so the system will create offer of coverage for newly eligible employees. And I believe that's what I wanted to cover here. I'm going to hand it over to Sue so she can talk a little bit more about the changes that are being driven by employees, right? All those mid-year enrollments.
Yes, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the limits on your flexible spending accounts or your health savings accounts. As we know, there are times when our open enrollment events occur before the new limits have been published. That doesn't mean you can't change them after the start of the year. As our Ariane demonstrated, you'll need to create a new contribution rule on your FSA plans. You'll need to update the limits on that rule and then run your benefit plan updates. And this will update the limits on your active enrollments. Let's talk a little bit about the limits on your flexible spending accounts or health savings accounts. As we all know, there are times when our open enrollment events occur before the new limits have been published. That doesn't mean you can't change them after the start of the year. As Ariane demonstrated, you'll need to create a new contribution rule, update the limits on that rule, and then run your benefit plan updates. And this will update the limits on your active enrollments. But let's take a closer look at how your payment schedules and contribution histories also impact these accounts. The benefit cycles remaining on your payment schedules is what drive the calculations for your mid-year FSA enrollments. The system uses the cycles remaining to determine the number of contributions the employee will have through the end of the year. And it uses those contributions to calculate the new deduction amount. If you're running a biweekly payment schedule, let's assume you have 26 payment deductions each year, and you need to make sure the benefit cycles remaining, they start at 26 and count down, covering all your pay periods for that year. You'll also want to make sure the current pay period has advanced and is set to the correct date. So let's take a closer look at payment schedules in the system and how we set those up. Give me just a minute. So the payment schedules are found under the in the benefits menu under administration, under the payroll tab here. We'll click on the payment schedules. We'll open this up. For in our sandbox, we're using 24 semi-monthly payments for our deduction cycles. So we're going to set it up starting at 24. You can see here, if we go over to pay periods, this is where the benefit cycles remaining are populated. And if I advance to the current year, so we're in 2025, we have 2 payments per month. So our first benefit cycle remaining will start at 24. And then it just counts down every pay cycle. If I have 3 pay periods in a month, I just duplicate that count and it won't take that additional deduction. And I count down to the end where I hit 1 and then the new pay year starts. Again, setting up your benefit cycles remaining is crucial to your deductions calculating correctly when you have your FSA enrollments. I also want to take a look at, your contribution history. Another item to be aware of is the contribution history on the employee's enrollment. If you're in GHR payroll, the contribution history is going to update automatically after each pay period. But if you're still in S3 payroll, you need to make sure you're sending the contribution history back up to GHR, whether it's via an interface or you're doing an upload via add-ins. You need to get that contribution history in there. The system uses contribution history to keep the employee from exceeding the annual limits that you've set on their plans. Let's go ahead and take a look in the system at my current FSA enrollment in GHR. Just a second as I change over my screens. So I am going to pull up George Washington. That is me today. He's currently enrolled in the flexible spending account for the medical, and his enrollment started January 1st, and right now is going through the end of the flex year. If we look at his details, when he enrolled on January 1st, there were 24 cycles, and he elected to contribute $600. When we look at his payroll tab, the system used those 24 cycles, divided it by 600, and his payment or contribution amount is $25 a paycheck. Now let's go ahead and look at how the contribution history and the benefit cycles are going to impact my life event. So I'm going to hop over to my employee side, and I'm going to go to benefits. Here you can see I'm currently enrolled in my FSA plan for medical. I have $25 a paycheck. I'm going to go to life events, and I'm going to say I recently got married, create an event. My event took place, let's say 5/31. I'm going to kind of skip down through all this good stuff here and go right to the enrollment. Here's my health plans. I got a little bit of a error on my dental. Same thing with my vision. Let me select those really quick. I'm just going to waive them. And then on my FSA plans, I can see that let's see what I'm currently enrolled in. There's 14 contributions left. And I'm currently enrolled in $25 per paycheck. I want to update this. And you can see here it shows that I've already made $250 in deductions for the calendar year. I'm going to up this to, let's just go with 3,300. And I want the annual total by year end. So if I try to do 3,300, using the annual total by the year end. So this option here means by the end of the flex plan year, by the end of the calendar year, I want to contribute a total of $3,300. The system knows based on my contribution history that I've already contributed 250. So it's going to subtract 250 from 3,300. That's how much I have left to contribute. And then it's going to divide it by the number of contributions I have left, 14, and it'll calculate my payment. If I were to do additional year-to-date contributions, what this does is says, in addition to what I've already contributed, I want to contribute another $3,300. If I've already contributed 250, the limit here, the annual limit's 3,300. If I tried to process this, it's going to give me an error. And then the third option is per pay period. Again, if I tried to do something like there's 14 pay periods left, if I tried to do something like $600 a pay period, I've already done 250. It's going to calculate these two numbers and it's going to add in this amount and it'll say you're over the limit and it's going to prevent me from doing that. So your contribution history and your number of your benefit cycles remaining are very important to make sure that your FSA accounts are loading and are working properly. So I'm going to go ahead and say about annual total by the year, the end of the year, I want this to be 3,300. I've already done 250. I have 14 contributions left. I hope someone can do the math, but that's going to put my contributions at $217 and change for the rest of the year. So that's how important those contribution history and benefit cycles remaining are to ensure that these are operating correctly. Another item I want to mention really quick is how to handle any special enrollment needs that you might have. For example, maybe you're offering a new plan mid-year, or maybe you have you need to have a small open enrollment due to changes in a specific union contract. You can manage these changes and offer new employees the benefits without having to wait for your next open enrollment. You simply create a new open enrollment event and assign that event to the affected employee group. You create a new enrollment group and a new enrollment rules to go along with that event that restrict their options to just the specific plan or whatever change is occurring. And you don't have to wait for the annual process. You can do that any time of the year. And this pretty much concludes our webinar for today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email questions@rpic.com and Ariane or I will get back to you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.